Whenever a name that isn't usually in the headline starts making waves within the wrestling community, such as when a new DLC drops for a WWE game, there will always be a bunch of people asking, who is this person? Whether it's older wrestling fans asking about newer wrestlers, or newer wrestling fans asking about older wrestlers, this is a valid question, whichever side of the spectrum you happen to be on. That is why we're starting a new series today on the channel, to get down into the nitty gritty and answer the hard-hitting questions that you're all looking for the answers to. With that being said, my name is Cameron Bash and welcome back to the Movement channel, where today, we're answering the question, who is Doink the Clown? Doink the Clown is one of the original larger-than-life performers in the world of wrestling, having debuted for the WWF nearly 30 years ago in the latter half of 1992. While the gimmick and persona of Doink was passed along to a few different people during its tenure, the face paint was most notably donned by its original wearer, Matt Osborne. Osborne was no stranger to the ring, as by the time he took up this gimmick, he was already a 14-year veteran in the business. Starting in December of 1978, he began wrestling under the ring name of Matt Bourne, where he wrestled for various NWA territories, most notably Pacific Northwest Wrestling, where he found great success as not only their heavyweight champion, but a 4-time tag team champion as well. It wasn't until the early to mid 1980s, however, that his most notable pre-WF stint came along, as in Mid-South Wrestling, he aligned himself with two people who would go on to become legends of the industry, Ted DiBiase and Jim Duggan. These three men would form the heel stable that would be known as the Rat Pack, where Bourne and DiBiase would go on to win the Mid-South Tag Team Championships together. Come March of 1985, Bourne got his first taste as a WWF performer, where he wrestled Rick McGraw to a time limit draw at the Boston Garden. From there, it was looking good for Bourne, as he had the unique privilege to be a part of the first ever WrestleMania, where he was scheduled to face Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. However, this would unfortunately end up being the peak of Bourne's run with the WWF this time around, as after losing to Steamboat at the grandest stage of them all, he remained a jobber all the way up until his last match with the company on April 29th of 1986. Bourne would then spend the next 6 years of his life honing his craft as both a singles and tag team competitor, winning many championship titles across companies such as WCCW, USWA, and even the main rival to the WWF, WCW themselves, before eventually returning to the WWF in September of 1992. Now, while he originally returned to the ring under the same name of Matt Bourne to begin with, him and Vince McMahon were having plenty of discussions behind the scenes as to what would be next for this 14-year veteran. It's said that after recalling the career of his father, Tony Bourne, Matt told Vince about the antics of his old tag team partner, Looney Moondog Mayne, and how he used to play tricks on the boys in the locker room back in the day. It was that piece of inspiration that began the foundation for what would eventually become the Doink character. However, it was Michael Hickstrand, aka Road Warrior Hawk, who brought the final piece of the puzzle to the table when he suggested the idea of having a miserable clown gimmick. With all the pieces now together, Doink the Clown was ready to be unleashed into the world. Before this clown ever saw an official in-ring match, he spent the first few months terrorizing and pranking members of the WWF audience that were in attendance during the shows, with the very first of these appearances appropriately taking place on Halloween Day in 1992. He would eventually move on to pranking his fellow wrestlers as well, before moving on to making his official in-ring debut in early 1993, where he was presented as a technically sound heel performer. The pranks that Doink played on the fans and wrestlers would continue when he got into the ring, as he would now use these tricks up his sleeve to take advantage of his opponents and catch them off guard, such as when he used a tripwire on Big Boss Man or accidentally poked Tatanka in the eye with a mop. However, these weren't the only elements of Doink's character that kept people interested, as on top of the technically sound wrestling, combined with the wacky and light-hearted comedy, there was another, darker, a more twisted element to this clown. that seemed to keep audiences on the edge of their seats. You see, between pranking everyone around him and laughing hysterically while doing so, every now and again, Doink would do something like stare menacingly into the souls of both his opponents, as well as the audience at home using the camera, before breaking out into his signature laugh once again. This showed off a particular nuance to Doink's character and the depths that it could possibly go to, giving him this aura that you just couldn't look away from, just in case he did something crazy and you missed it. These antics led Doink into one of the most infamous rivalries of his career against the man known as Crush, aka Bryan Adams. Doink would attack Crush with a loaded prosthetic arm filled with lead and batteries, beating the man in one of the most brutal but confusing attacks that had ever been witnessed. It was only when officials were able to pull Doink off of Crush did he stop, and then he just went back to his signature laugh that he had become known for. It was this feud with Crush that would lead Matt Osborne into the second WrestleMania match of his career at WrestleMania 9. Only this time, he was going in as Doink the Clown and with more momentum behind him than ever before. Despite that, the two went on to have a pretty terrible match as far as WrestleMania standards are concerned, and the crowd remained dead throughout most of the match until the finish, where after a messy ref bump, a second Doink the Clown would appear, once again with the loaded prosthetic arm, to help the original Doink defeat Crush and win the match. This moment and feud would mark the peak performance for Doink the Clown when it came to his performance as a heel, as he would then go on to spend most of the summer months of 1993 continuing the same old feud with Crush, and losing to other, more established names such as Bret Hart and Tatanka. It wasn't until September of that year where Doink started to get his edge back with the crowd, as within the space of a few weeks, he not only had the opportunity to turn face when he dumped a bucket of water over Bobby Heenan, but he also split from his then tag team partner / manager, Jerry the King Lawler, by making Burger King jokes and eventually dumping a bucket of water on top of his head as well. Between these two segments and the positive response that they got from the audience, things were starting to look up for the Matt Osborne portrayed Doink the Clown. But after an incident in late 1993 where Bam Bam Bigelow caught Osborne smoking weed in the hallway of their hotel, Matt Osborne was released from the WWF. Osborne later went on to theorize in a shoot interview that Bigelow had snitched on him because he didn't like having to put him over. But either way, Osborne's time with the WWF would once again be over for now. From there, the legacy of Doink the Clown is split up into two different paths. The direction that WWE took and the direction that Matt Osborne himself took. For the WWE, shortly after Osborne's departure from the company, the decision was made to pass the gimmick over to Ray Apollo, who became the new man to don the gimmick of Doink the Clown. Apollo as Doink went on to have some of the character's most infamous and remembered moments with the WWF, such as aligning himself with Dink the Clown, his comedy sidekick who he'd spend months pranking his opponents with. This culminated in a match at Survivor Series in 1994, where Doink and Dink, now joined by Wink and Pink, took on the team of Jerry the King Lawler and his mini kings, Cheesy, Queasy, and Sleazy. Unlike WrestleMania 9, however, this reign of success wasn't going to end in another victory for Doink, as not only did he lose to Lawler in this traditional Survivor Series tag match, but this loss also represented the last time that Doink would be heavily featured in one of Vince McMahon's programs. As for Matt Bourne, it seemed as if he wasn't quite ready to leave the clown gimmick behind, as in 1994, he began wrestling for the infamous ECW, continuing to go by the ring name of Doink. This wasn't something that was very well received from the ECW fans, as they viewed this product as an alternative to what the WWF was doing, so seeing a gimmick like this in their territory wasn't something that really sat well with them. This led to Doink losing a match to then world champion Shane Douglas, who after the match went on to criticize Vince McMahon, telling him that he wasted the true potential of Matt Osborne by putting him in a comic relief role. This led to an interesting gimmick change for Osborne, as from there on out, he went by the ring name of Born Again, where he continued to wear some elements of the old Doink the Clown gimmick, most notably leaving out the signature green wig. After defeating his opponents, Bourne would dress them up like clowns, mocking them in the same way that he felt had been done to him. But before this run could really pick up any momentum, Matt Osborne was released from ECW due to personal issues. Osborne would continue working the independent wrestling circuit for many years following his departure from ECW, mostly being a part of special reunion shows where he would compete under his original ring name of Matt Bourne. From there, the legacy of Doink the Clown enters into a whirlwind, with an endless list of performers and legends taking up the mantle over the next 2 decades for a variety of reasons, including the likes of the Brooklyn Brawler, Eugene, and even the one and only Chris Jericho, with the most recent spotting of this clown having taken place at WWE's Money in the Bank pay-per-view in 2020, where an unknown man played the clown for a cameo appearance. However, the most notable of the sporadic and random appearances has to be the one that took place in December of 2007, as on the Raw 15th anniversary, in a special Legends Battle Royale, as for one last time, the man who brought the character to life, Matt Osborne, wore the official makeup of Doink the Clown as part of the WWE, in a moment that must have been really cool for him to have been a part of, considering that Matt had had the Doink character ripped away from him 10 years earlier. After his final appearance as Doink the Clown within the WWE, in a very similar way to that of his Born Again gimmick from the 90s, Matt repackaged himself as a character known as Reborn Again, which he modelled after Heath Ledger's Joker from the Dark Knight trilogy. He would continue to portray this character on the independent circuit in a variety of different ways for the next 6 years, before his tragic and untimely death in 2013. On June 28th of that year, Matt Osborne was found dead in his home in Plano, Texas at the age of 55. Though no weapons were found near his body and the police believed the death to be an accident, an investigation was launched into his death, which later determined the cause of death to be an overdose of morphine and hydrocodone. Osborne also suffered from heart disease, which had been a contributing factor in his death. In June 2015, a wrongful death lawsuit was filed against the WWE by the mother of 2 of Osborne's 4 children, stating that WWE created a culture of violence and sacrificed Matt Osborne's brain for its own profit. WWE attorney Jerry McDevitt said that the suit was without merit and blamed the attorneys involved for taking advantage of Osborne's family. The lawsuit was later dismissed in court when they couldn't prove that WWE was responsible for Osborne's death. Despite being taken from this world at the young age of 55, the legacy of Matt Osborne lives on. While he may not have been involved in many of Doink the Clown's biggest and most memorable moments, if not for him and the sacrifices that he made early on in his career, perhaps there never would have been a Doink the Clown character to begin with. And without a character like Doink to lay the groundwork all the way back in the 90s, perhaps fan favourite characters from today, such as The Fiend, wouldn't work out so well. So, there you have it, folks. Now you know who is Doink the Clown.
Oh, come on, what the hell is going on here? Wait, no, that's impossible. No, what the hell is he doing here?